Well, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? James Rodas with the Nebraska Auto Body Association, and our good buddy Tony Adams is not going to make it tonight for all you CABA people, but we miss him and we hope him safe travels. As always, make sure that you put your questions in the chat box. And tonight we have Mr. Dave Robinette from iCar, and he's going to fill us in on all the industry update and trends. Dave handles our area, so if you have any questions, this is your guy. So without further ado, Mr. Robinette, take it away, my friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. I wanted to start off with just a brief introduction. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I've been in the industry for quite some time, but I thought maybe a quick background check is a good idea right here and now. I started out back in the 80s. That's going way back when I graduated from Weber State University. Then it was a college in Ogden, Utah, which is where I am tonight talking to you. Went through that program and got into the collision industry as a technician and worked in there. I actually got a business partnership going with a fellow that actually attended school with me at the time at Weber State University. And we were partners for about, I'm going to say it was just under 20 years, about 19 years or so. And we were successful, had multiple shops, did some fine work together. And then we ended that relationship and I moved on. Yes, I did. I moved on selling out and went over to the insurance industry for a few years. It was something that I thought, well, I didn't want to go back into another body shop at the time, felt a little burned out on it. So I went to the insurance side. Oh my heavens, that's a burnout too. So I was over there for about 15 years doing insurance claims work as a supervisor, claims supervisor. And all along the way throughout those years, I had been teaching iCar classes in the nights and the evenings and weekends and what have you. There was the common thread that ties the two industries together. So I spent a lot of time teaching iCar classes. And then about 7 years ago, I went to work for iCar as a full-time staff. I don't teach too much anymore. I do a lot of meetings with the volunteers and the committees and working with the schools now. And I do presentations like we are on tonight, but I don't do too much of the teaching as I once did before. But now with iCar for about 7 years, that's the extent of my career with the collision industry to date. So I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad to have been invited to come and talk to you. I'm also glad that I am working with and have great relationships with the Nebraska Auto Body Association via James Rodas. I appreciate him and all he has done with the work he does, not only with our iCar committee here locally, but also just in general with your association. I know that you know him well. He has been very active in taking care of your needs and working the business of the association as needed. And I just want to give a quick shout out to James for the fine and hard work that he has done for you guys. And I hope you're supporting him as well as I like to try to do as well. Anyway, so thank you for the little bit of time we can spend with each other this evening. I want to kind of jump into a couple of different topics tonight. I want to start off with the in-shop problem that I think a lot of you are starting to feel more and more of as time has gone on. That is the advanced driver assist systems. That ADAS system that has been developing slowly over the years and integrating more and more into the vehicles and the design has been coming at us incrementally over time. This is a scale or a chart that I pulled out of one of our iCar programs that just talked about these very two features on a lot of these cars now, the forward collision warning systems and the autonomous braking. And you can see back in 2014, they were just kind of getting started. And then just incrementally, you were seeing more and more of that stuff coming up. And they're projecting to really have quite a bit of it out there as a percentage of the industry by 2025. Well, I think that this is an outdated graph now, because I'm going to tell you that the title says ADAS is on your doorstep. Well, I'm going to tell you something different. I think it's not at your doorstep. I think it got in your house. I think it's gone through your refrigerator. I think it's sitting in your favorite lounge chair right now, and it's not paying rent. It is here. It's here in a big way, and it has just created a lot of interesting challenges for the collision industry. Positive opportunities as well as really difficult challenges to try to meet, and difficult on several levels. But there is hope on the horizon. But the idea here is to talk about a little bit more of what is going on in the industry to help you kind of navigate your way through that. So here's an example. You've seen this already on many vehicles. This is just one vehicle that has all these different features now that are coming out there. The complexity of these systems is making that repair all the more complex as well. All the different features. And by the way, it's not that they just have these features on here. It's that some of these features, or many of them, actually interact with one another. They take cues and signals and react with and about each other, depending on the conditions of the driving and the conditions around on the road, and what's happening if there's an accident or evasive maneuvers occurring. These things all are different features that are on the vehicle that talk to each other. And in an accident, boy, all those things also have to be addressed to be sure that they're operating properly after the repairs are done. After the paint is on and nice and shiny, all these other things still need to work. I saw this a while ago, and it really struck me about how complex these systems are. This was an illustration I saw about the sensing units and the wiring and how it all interconnects back together. You know, I got to tell you, the first time I saw this, I'm thinking human blood vessels. I'm thinking the arterial pulmonary system of a human being or an animal or something. It just looks that way. Maybe it's just because it was colored red in this particular illustration. You see the sensors that they're all over the body in all different ways and all different places on that body. It almost makes me feel or look like it is a car that if you hit that car, it was involved in an accident, would it feel pain? It looks like it might, because that looks like a circulatory system. It's a nervous system to transmit signals back and forth to the CPUs to help control all these different features and these interactions of these features on the vehicle. So I just thought it was interesting to see that, and it kind of drove it home to me how complex this is, almost like the human body in this case. That's what it looks like. And all the different things that the car can now do. I was alluding to the fact that maybe it feels pain. I'm going to tell you from this light, I think it sees things. It actually looks out ahead and can see obstacles, see things in its way, see lines on the road, see a deer jumping out in front of you, or whatever the case may be. Or if you're backing into a stall, it sees whether you're going to hit the car behind you or not, or sees if you're close enough to the curb. It's very interesting how this has all been put together in such a way that it really does have interactive systems that make you feel like the thing's almost alive. And if that's the case, it has to be put back the way it was before so that it performs as it was designed to do. Now, we know that. I'm not telling you anything new about that. What's new is the fact that there is so much of it now that it's become really, really a challenge to get the cars repaired properly and back out on the road as it relates to these systems working as they should. All right, so let's start from scratch here, right from the beginning. Really, we've always known that the collision repairs themselves have had to be done to a level that the specifications have been restored, the structural integrity has been restored, the vehicle itself needs to be able to go down the road straight. Wheel alignment angles are very important to how it handles, especially in evasive maneuvers, that sort of thing. But what's interesting now is the ADAS calibration accuracy is affected also by how accurate the vehicle has been repaired and how accurate those specifications have been remet. All right, so here's the illustration. It's become very, very important that the vehicle center line is correct, but now the thrust angle on the alignment absolutely has everything to do with which way that car is going to track and which way it's pointing as it goes down the road. Now, you've seen cars that are out of alignment, or maybe they've adjusted for some kind of a misalignment and the car looks like it's dog tracking going down the road. We have seen that time and time again over the years. And what's interesting about that is if you have a camera on the front of that car and it's looking down the road as the vehicle moves down the road, well, here, let's think about it for a second. At 75 miles per hour, in about 6 seconds, that vehicle is going to travel about 220 yards distance. Now, if you apply the mathematical 1 in 60 rule, that means a 1 degree error equals about 3.7 yards at that 220 yard distance, or about 11 feet off target. That average highway lane that car is driving in is about 10 feet wide. The radar is looking, if it's 1 degree off, it's looking into the next lane over. But the car is going down the road straight, or at least it's driving straight. It's just not aimed straight. That's kind of an interesting thought to think about and see how critical that calibration has to be. So I don't know if anybody here is a marksman or into target shooting, but I kind of like this analogy here. A long-range marksman knows the proper scope sighting and the micro adjustments that they use to affect the trajectory of that round will have everything to do with where that round hits or misses the target. The marksman has the advantage of trial and error, or to use the terms that we'll see in ADAS procedures for recalibration, static and dynamic testing, to fine-tune the accuracy of that round placement for the marksman. It's not that much different for what we're doing with the vehicles and the repairs and being certain that things are aimed correctly so that we hit the target as we're supposed to. Interesting thought. So that said, I want to introduce the fact that there are possibilities out there that you could, in fact, do a correct or a successful calibration. I'm going to tell you that those two may not necessarily be the same thing. It is possible to correctly calibrate something or successfully calibrate something, and it's not correct. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at a couple of things that you would probably have to be most aware of as you get started in that process, or at least try to be sure that you're understanding what needs to be done and then do it correctly. First of all, you ought to understand how the systems work. I mean, what is it supposed to do? What is that feature designed to do on that vehicle in and of itself? And then once you've understood that, you might need to understand if it works or interacts with other systems that take cues or signals from it. And so that being said, if you understand the system somewhat, what it's supposed to do, the next thing is to understand how it's supposed to interact back and forth and be able to test it to be sure that it is interacting as it should. Well, okay, let's step back into the repairs for a second. It was involved in an impact, and you've got parts that have been involved in that impact. So, okay, so maybe I got to repair something, or maybe I've got to replace something. If I've got parts that are only allowed to be replaced and not repaired, I've got to follow some procedures about that. Maybe the part is needing to be replaced. Maybe the mount that it is mounted to or to the vehicle is out of specification, bent, or needs to be replaced by way of the procedures that are written and you need to follow. Maybe wiring can be repaired, maybe it can't be. It really depends on the vehicle and what the manufacturer says. And interestingly, some of those parts, it may be a real simple deal. It might just be a plug and play. You plug it right in and it starts working like it should, and there's no more to do with it than that. Or maybe it's a part that needs reprogramming, or maybe even one of those really sophisticated ones that has to be taught, relearn how to function and interact with the rest of the system on a vehicle. Again, that will be part of the procedure that you find out that you need to follow and be sure is completed to its satisfaction, so the system is working as it should. So what about that? Now you're back to that whole published procedures and following where they tell you to go and making sure that you're getting those procedures from the proper source. Now, I will tell you, there's about only one source that we can really say is the source, and it's OEM. However, there are other carriers of information like the iCar RTS system or AllData or some of the other ones that are out there that you can get some of the procedures from. Generally speaking, they're getting their information from the OEM. So the idea that I want to plant with you here is you need to use published repair procedures that are hearkening back to the OEM itself and making sure that you are using what that is documented to be. All right. from whatever source that might be. So like I say, I'm telling you right now, the OEM is probably the best place to go, because everything iCar has comes from the OEM. Little caveat on the side, when people would say, got to repair vehicles to iCar specifications or iCar procedures or per iCar procedures. Well, that's a little bit of a misnomer. It's per OEM procedures. iCar is just a good clearinghouse to find all that information. Or if you don't get it from iCar, you ought to get it from the OEM, or you ought to get it from some other source that uses OEM as its basis for that information. Bottom line is, you're the one that's going to do the repairs, and you want to make sure it's right, and it better follow OEM procedures. All right. The other thing too is it may well be that if you need to get some pre-calibration requirements identified and find out what the system is going to ask you to do, there may be a few things you need to do before you even start the repair, before you even start tearing the vehicle down. There may be some pre-calibration requirements that include downloading with a scan tool what the codes are before you even get going. It depends on what the procedure says, but I'm finding more and more of the time, as I've looked into it, there are these pre-calibration requirements that really need to be adhered to, so you have a starting point and then a known ending point you can compare to. Some of those procedures may tell you can do some things static or dynamic, and the difference is static means in the shop, do it right there while the car is sitting there, it's not moving, or dynamic means out on the road testing, things like that. Got to follow those procedures based on what they're asking you to do, and stay with that. Here's the thing. I think probably, I would guess, knowing the association that you are, I think the members of this association are already pretty familiar, and I would guess consistent with downloading procedures. Those that are out there playing a little bit of a roulette game by not consistently downloading and following procedures, now those folks are probably just bought themselves a lottery ticket that they probably don't want, because you don't know when that's going to come back and bite you. So little notion there of concern, maybe a little caveat of don't get relaxed, because they keep changing stuff on us. All right, so we're talking about the procedures. What about the equipment itself? If you have access to that equipment or are going to get some equipment, what equipment can you use? What's available out there? What's OEM approved, and it will get that recalibration done successfully and correctly, that the OEM will sanction on that, so that you get that right. There's a lot of aftermarket stuff. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how much an aftermarket one will work as compared to another one, because I got to tell you, that's a moving target. Excuse the pun. Targets. Yeah, it is a moving target. There's a lot of up in the air conversation, a lot of up in the air negotiations and information, proprietary and otherwise, back and forth, OEM working with aftermarket suppliers or not, or whatever the case may be. I got to tell you, that is just, any day you want to pick up one of the industry magazines, you'll hear about information available or not available, or equipment that's the right equipment or the wrong equipment. It gets to be kind of convoluted. In fact, it's a little bit difficult to track because it moves around so much. Whatever equipment you do get your hands on, if you're going to go that route, make sure that you've done your homework, you've done your due diligence, and be real sure that you've got the right equipment. So here's a funny little side note to that. I know that in some cases, the OEM has placed security protocols on the vehicle onboard CPUs to prevent unauthorized access of non-OEM scan tools. Not every car does that. Not every OEM does that, but some do. Now, these may require the use of proprietary, what I'm going to call security gateway tools. What they have is a little program on those scan tools that unlocks the CPU security protocols and allows you to do the work, the recalibration work necessary. The idea from the OEM is to protect against aftermarket scan tools. Sure, they kind of protect their own market, but there's this other thing that goes on in the cyber world that we're all kind of aware of and kind of worried about, and that's called hacking. And you hear all the time about how to hack this or hack that and get more power out of your car or not. I'm not going to tell you that's good or bad. I can just tell you there's a lot of worry about what could happen on a safety system that could be hacked. And so there's a lot about that we should not underestimate. There's another side of that too that makes it kind of interesting, and that is that some diagnostic trouble codes do not show up in the accident. You'll get the little dash lights or a diagnostic trouble code, even if you're using a scanner to find out if there's any codes in there. There's some of them that won't show up in some cases because the condition that would have tripped that code was not occurring at the time of the impact. But it may show up weeks later after the repairs are done and the car's gone down the road. Okay, so here's an example. Let's say car was in an impact and the radar sensor was moved. It wasn't really damaged, it was just moved. But it was not damaged at all in the collision and would not throw a code until the next time it's actuated while driving. And then it's not aimed right, and then it throws a code. And this car is down the road several weeks before that condition ever exists. That's an interesting challenge to try to meet and be sure that you're not leaving that unattended to. So anyway, just a side note on some of the things that are a little interesting when you get into the equipment itself and follow those procedures. The other thing is a lot of these procedures require space in the shop and not a small amount of space. Dimensions of the space will vary depending on the OEM and what they're asking you to do, but it's got to be clean, it's got to be level, bright, visible, obstacle free, so the car is not seeing things it's not supposed to see and getting confused by or distracted by some item that's in the way of the camera or in the background of the camera or something like that that makes it difficult for it to focus. Some systems may allow a static calibration even if the targets are positioned wrong, or if the camera is out of position, aimed out of position. It's an interesting notion that in some cases the system will tell you, hey, wait a minute, that target's not where we think it's supposed to be, so we won't let you calibrate, and it'll throw you an error code so you can't go forward with some systems. Other systems will say, oh, that's where the target is, huh? Okay, well, let's calibrate to that. The thing is that you're not really calibrating the vehicle, you're issuing an electronic command to the onboard systems of the vehicle to do a self recalibration. And they'll look out there and look at those targets, and if they're in the right position, then you've got a correct recalibration. If they're in the wrong position, even by out a little bit, remember my 1 in 60 example, then you can successfully calibrate, but it won't be correct. It's looking down the road, and 220 yards later, it's looking in the other lane and not even avoiding the obstacle coming at it in its own lane. So because the system relies on you, the technician, to be sure that that is right, you better be right, because it does. It believes you. It will calibrate in many cases, whether it's right or it's wrong, and it's going to be the human error if it's wrong, because we didn't get it right. Another fun little illustration. Okay, so I don't know how many of you are outdoorsmen. I kind of use the marksman thing. Let me throw this one at you. So this fisherman right here is going to tell you that's a 17-inch brown trout. Nice fish. Well, is that 17 inches or not? Do you believe him? Do you think that that thing is 17 or 18, or is it 16? Well, how close is the camera? What's the angle of the camera? Is he holding that fish close enough to his face that you can get the proper contact? I don't know. And fishermen lie to you anyway. So if that's a 17-inch fish, do you believe him or not? I guess if he has a believable face, and I think this one does. I think he's a believable guy. That's 17-inch brown trout. Fun. All right. Sorry about that. I was having some fun with that. Okay. Point is this. With all of these things that kind of have to be balanced out and make sure that you are paying attention to it and have not left anything to error, and you have all that, maybe it just sounds like that's a bit overwhelming for the average shop, for all the different variables that are out there and all the different vehicles that are out there and all the different equipment that is out there. It might seem like a bridge too far for you. So some of you might just say, let's just forget about it. Maybe it's not something that we even want to deal with in-house at all. Some will, some won't. But there's a lot of people that are making the business decision that maybe they won't jump in with both feet and try to get their shop up to speed to do so. Like I said, it's going to be a business decision to decide what to do. By the way, I saw that sign outside of Brooklyn. That's a real sign, by the way. I was laughing like crazy when I saw that thing. That's why I put it in this thing for you. I hope you're laughing like crazy too. All right. So what about that? What if you decide to forget about it? Well, you can't forget about doing their calibrations and making sure everything's right. So there may be an alternative for you out there. And I didn't want to just raise a bunch of stuff and tell you, oh, here's all the trouble you're going to have, and then walk away and say, your problem. Well, here's a solution, one potential solution. Right now, there are several, and there's more out there almost every day, that are service providers that do these recalibration processes for you and can help make sure that you've got that done and done correctly. Some of them do it remotely. Some of them will do it right there at the shop. Some of them will come over and bring it to their own shop. Some of them will just do it through a modem. If the vehicle does not need anything more than static, it doesn't need a dynamic test drive, well, maybe they can do it just by a modem. But maybe you're done with that, and maybe you still got to go do a static test drive and then report back to the service provider that's helping you. I've just listed a few here. These are some folks I know and I have heard about and listened to them talk. They seem to know what they're talking about, and I think there's a few more out there as well. The idea is basically you need to do your homework. If you're not going to do this in-house and you're going to go ahead and rely on a service provider to do it, you need to know a few things. You need to know whether they're mobile or if they're remote. Doesn't matter on that point particularly. It does matter, however, are they properly trained? Do they have the licenses, the proper licenses to do the work for the OEMs and do that proper calibration? Are they properly equipped to do that? Can they do it with the equipment that they have? And by the way, at the end of the day, when they're all done with it and they just said, okay, it's all good, are they able to produce for you a document that is a calibration specification validation to know that it's done and done right? That's got to go in the file right there with all the invoices and everything else you did to the vehicle so that you have proper documentation. So at the end of the day, it really becomes important that you have that proper documentation and you've got something for backup should you ever be called upon to produce it. Okay, pretty important on that. Still needs to get done, still needs to get done correctly. Okay, because if it doesn't work, they're coming to you. All right. Yeah, so that's the thing. Document, document, document. Now I beat that horse pretty hard. If you got questions about that, we can entertain a few ideas around that if you happen to have any. I'm going to shift gears here real quick. James, I'm ready to start shifting gears into something else. Is there anybody that's got a question at the moment?
Nothing yet, sir.
Oh, it's because I haven't taken a breath. I didn't even have a chance to even formulate an idea. Okay, no problem.
Nope.
I'll keep going.
Gives us a good chance to remind them that make sure you get your questions in so we can get them answered at the end. I know calibrations is when a lot of people need to probably wrap their heads around a little closer. So
sure,
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. If you do it in-house, you'll be doing some homework. I offer this as a solution for many shops that I think there's going to be a majority of shops that are going to that don't do it in-house. So they're going to have to do it some other way. And this service provider idea may be the thing that really takes off. And there may be a myriad of them out there. So be sure you do your homework on the people that you have do that extra work. So anyway, all right, I'm going to shift gears now. That's about the ADAS systems. Well, what's after ADAS? Well, there's some conversation out there in the world about these autonomous vehicles. And depending on who you talk to, if it's Elon Musk, we have these all ready to go. We can do that starting tomorrow morning. If it's somebody else that has a little more information about what does and doesn't work out there in the industry and the uptake from the general driving population, some people are saying we're still 10, 15 years away. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I have any inside track on that, but here's some interesting things that have to be developed for some of these autonomous vehicles to operate as I believe they're envisioned to do. So you basically just call the car to you, you get in it and it drives and you don't have to pay attention to anything other than whatever you're reading or drinking or whatever you're enjoying at the time. The idea is basically the cars have to have the ability to do that completely autonomously. And there's this data transfer that is required for these vehicles to operate at the speeds and calculate at the speeds that are required. So this wireless theoretical data transfer speeds might be something that might be interesting to you. You know what 4G is. Most of you may still have 4G phones at this particular point. There's lot of the mobile phone carriers that are starting to tout and talk about the 5G, but the 4G is been kind of the latest standard, the flag bearer. If it's not 4G, you don't have the latest stuff. But now they're starting to move into this 5G. Now the difference between 4G and 5G has to do with the speed at which information is transferred and how much lag time or lack of lag time there is. So the difference between 4G and 5G is about 100 times faster for 5G. And then the illustration I've got here, you would need something that is really fast moving, that will detect obstacles or pedestrians or poles or curbs or buildings or whatever it is, detect those items very quickly as they're moving and as the vehicle is moving, and get that information back downloaded and processed properly for the vehicle to take that information and act on it. So 5G networks are kind of still in development, and they're kind of working towards getting them better and better and faster. And it's kind of funny, the wavelengths they have to use for the 5G networks are a little different. The signals travel in a kind of a higher band. And if you understand how signals propagate once they're sent out, they can't travel very far, cannot travel very far, and they have a hard time getting through walls and windows, lampposts, and other hard surfaces. So the way that they need to fix that, or at least account and accommodate for it, is they need to have these little amplifiers or signal transfer. It's kind of like you have a radio station and they have all the little substations all up and down whatever locale you're in, and they have all these different radio stations playing maybe on different frequencies, but from the same general provider. Well, that's kind of an idea that kind of makes sense in this case. They have to have all these little translators everywhere, so that you're driving down the road, you might go down a city block and you might have to drive by several of these translators to keep that high speed signal available to the vehicle for it to read and to send back information very, very quickly. And from what I saw, I think what I was seeing is these little translators are like the size of pizza boxes, and you might start seeing a bunch of those around in the cities where they're trying to build the 5G networks. You'll start seeing these funny little pizza box size translators, or I guess they're going to be like antennas of sorts, to keep that signal from being absorbed or bouncing away into the buildings or being lost with hard objects and things like that. Has to do with how high the band frequency is. And what's interesting is that I don't know if they're going to call it 6G. You can go out and take a quick look in the all the technical journals and what have you. They're tossing it around. They may call it something entirely different, but 6G network is like cloud computing. It's like 1,000 times faster still, but this is where you get into the cloud computing capabilities, where you're dealing with artificial intelligence and deep learning, so that patterns are recognized. And this V2X I've got there on the screen, that's vehicle to everything. My illustration shows that the car is talking to the car ahead of it. It's talking to the truck way down, further down the street. It's talking to the car way down the street. It's talking to the signals, the vehicle that's right there next to you. In fact, the signals know if there is traffic congestion. Your car will know that and will reroute to less congested patterns. If there's a storm or an accident or something that's impeding the road ahead, it will alert you to that and just make automatic calculations to detour around it. All this stuff just happens. If you got involved in an accident, your car will send out the signal to everything around it so that everything else gets rotated around you. It's just interesting how that type of data transfer and the speed at which it has to be able to be accomplished would be necessary for these cars to be truly autonomous and get the speed of transfer and reaction that would be required for us to zip through intersections without any spaces between cars. I've seen that illustration. It's just unnerving. I don't know if I could sit in a car doing that. Interesting. All right. So that's just a little blurb about autonomous vehicles from just the wireless data transfer needs for these to be done in not only in concept but in quantity. So everybody's doing that. Can't even imagine. All right, we good?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, no, nothing coming in yet.
Okay, good deal. All right, I've got them speechless so far. All right.
Got them right where you want them.
That's right. Well, I got them right where I want them, because they can't throw tomatoes at me because I'm in Utah. You got to have a heck of an arm to throw a tomato my way now. All right. Let me shift gears one more time, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the deal. The other thing that's keeping folks awake at night, other than ADAS, well, it's our workforce. I know for a fact that our workforce is something that these days. I do have some information that is from the Collision Repair Education Foundation, or CREF. Sounds like somebody put their mic on.
No, they shouldn't be able to.
Something on your end
Look into
happening?
We good?
I think so.
Felt like I was in a barrel going over Niagara Falls for a minute. Okay, here we go. So the workforce is a challenge for us. Right now, based on the last survey that CREF has done, this is a 2019 snapshot of the industry. They were seeing that the average age of technicians in the industry is slowly rising and continues to rise. And right now, the average age of a technician is about 41. All right, well, I'm beyond that, so I wish I was 41 again, but that is something that's interesting and way different than what it used to be. Almost 3 out of 5 shops, and this is as of 2019, 3 years ago, reported hiring at least one entry-level technician in the past year. So that's indicating the fact that they need those folks, and they're continuing to hire those folks as needed. And the general census is that the number of new entry-level technicians is not keeping pace with how many are retiring or exiting the industry right now. And that is a concern coming out of our industry and the needs that we have. And this at the time when we need as many new folks as we can get, especially those that might be good at dealing with all these electronics. So you can find this actual survey. You go to the Collision Repair Education Foundation website, and they have this snapshot. I've got a 2016 version. This is a 2019 version. My guess is they're going to do another one in 2021, and we'll get later the latest data there. But the trends having been built over the last several years are pretty interesting to see and pretty undeniable. So here's one of the excerpts right here. It says the collision industry workforce. The business statistics are back in 1995, we had about 45,800 shops, and in the time since then, it has slowly kind of fallen off, and now we're about 40,000 shops, just a tick under 41,000 in 2019. Okay, that isn't that big a deal, but here's what I think is a big deal. Take a look at some of the percent of small shops, medium shops, large shops down in the lower left-hand corner that listed there. And you see the percentages in 1995, 44% were small shops, 40% were medium size, 15% were large shops. Well, look over now in 2019, that 44% of small shops is now 4.6%. That 40% of medium shops is only 25%. Look what happened to the large shops. 15% up to 70%. So our industry is changing. These larger shops are starting to come into being. Now that could be multi-store units, that could be mega shops. I know one shop that I was working with for in-shop knowledge assessment a couple of years ago in Southern California. The average size shop had been somewhere between, well, back in 1995, it was almost 5 technicians. Back in 2013, it was about 11. 16, it was 12. 19, it's about 13. I was working with this shop. It had 90 technicians in that shop, and all of the repairs they were doing. They were working on Mercedes and Audis and high-end vehicles, but they were also dealing with Chevrolets and Fords and Toyotas. interesting how the shop sizes have started to kind of change as well. So that's an interesting statistic in and of itself. Do you think that has impact on the workforce itself? You think that might be kind of a big old vacuum cleaner, those big shops vacuuming up whatever they can for available technicians coming into the industry? So if you're in any of these other two categories, you might be kind of vying for those folks coming in. If you're looking for entry-level technicians, it's interesting little statistic here. If you were looking for them and you did like a posting online, and back in 2016, a lot of people were doing that, at about 38%. Now about 52% are doing that online, and you can see all the different ways that these people could be accessed by way of advertising, the help wanted sign, all the way on to automotive associations like yourself, technical schools, and that's the one I'm going to be focusing on in a minute. That a lot of folks, we're looking for new technicians from the technical schools, and that number has gone up as well. Social networks, definitely. Boy, we've got a social network that is an unruly thing, but we are certainly using it for the work that we do. So that's where a lot of folks have been looking to find new technicians. One of the things is there are a lot of folks out there not coming into our industry because they just flat don't know about our industry. When CREF did the survey for this in 2019, here's what the respondents said. Almost 31% reported, this is the technicians, reported the technicians making $70,000 or higher. And there's a lot of the folks that don't know that might be looking at our industry, these young kids that are trying to decide what they're going to do with their careers. So there's an answer to some of this, I think, in the offing. I'm just showing you the statistics to kind of show you what the students may or may not know, what the schools are trying to do, and what the Labor Bureau thinks is going on out here, which is not exactly accurate to what we know is to be true. All right, so here's a reality check. I know personally there are many schools in the Northwest region that may be or are on the brink of closing those programs due to continually low enrollment. Not enough kids coming in, not enough reasons to stay open, according to the administrators of these schools. And I've actually had a few of them close, and local people said, well, wait a minute, we didn't want you to close. We need those kids coming out of those programs. But there's so few of them coming out of the programs that the schools, like any other business, are saying, hey, that's an expensive program to maintain for the few people that come into it, and the fewer still that stay long enough to even graduate. So there's a challenge there. So if our schools start to close in large numbers, we've got a compounding problem trying to find that workforce, those entry-level folks. So I think this is what's starting to happen. This is me. I'm saying the collision industry's got to get on the stick and start collaborating more with the schools, and to find the recruits, find those students for those schools. The schools need to do their own recruiting too, but golly, what kind of work could we do if we joined forces and started seeing those sharp young folks out there and start investigating and introducing the collision industry to those folks, and then get them into the school? Because basically, I think the collision shops are realizing, a lot of them are now, that the need to build a mentorship or a training arm of that business, of your business, in fact, to bring on these apprentices and work with students and get them to graduate and basically bring them across the bridge, get that crosswalk established from the school environment. They learned some basic skills, but you know what they didn't learn that the schools cannot do? They did not learn how to work at this fast pace that the production shops do. Quick, fast story. I myself am a victim and a product of that. I got out of Weber State University and I graduated from that program, and I was good. I was helping other students do the paint work. I was showing them how to do body work. I was good at what I did. So when I went to work for my first body shop, I was feeling pretty good about what I was capable of doing. 6 weeks later, I was fired. What? I mean, it struck me hard. Wait a minute. And I asked them why. They said, well, you're good at what you do. You're good quality work and what have you, but you were just too darn slow. In fact, they gave me the nickname. They called me Glacier because I was moving so slow they couldn't see me moving. Well, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that there was a speed factor to it. I just knew if I did a good job, I'd have a good job. No, I had to be fast at it, and I got fired from my first one. So that was my acclimation to the fast-paced production environment that I was not equipped for coming out of a school. And that's back in the 80s. It's even more so now. All right, off my soapbox. All right, so here's the call to action. I'm going to tell you this is how we're going to help ourselves, okay? Get involved personally. I'm talking to you. Get involved personally with your local schools and have that do have collision programs, and do it now. Get on their advisory committee. Get involved with an ICAR committee that is on an advisory committee. Something. Just get involved with those schools so that you can see what they're doing. You can help them with their programs. You can give them some advice. You can basically assist them with their programs. And then you need to assist with recruiting and help finding students for those programs as well, and get those students introduced to and in those programs so that they can learn the basic skills that they need to come to your shop later on, and encourage them to complete and graduate. Because one of the things the schools look at is not only how many are coming in, but how many are actually graduating. And that number, I remember a lot of people quit the programs before they graduated because they found jobs. Well, okay, that's good that they found jobs, but the schools are sitting there going like, well, why do we maintain a program that we can't get anybody to actually graduate out of? So we got to help the schools with the numbers they need to hit as well, and get those students to stay in school until they're done. But there's no reason why you couldn't have them part-time as an apprentice or some program like that. And then finally, hire them, train them, be a mentor, be a coach to those students, and bring them across so we don't blow them out of the water with that fast-paced environment. It's the last thing that we need is to have put all that time, effort into a student and got them up and running and ready to go, and then blow them out of the water because they're not prepared for what we're going to throw at them in a collision repair shop. And then some other industry snaps them up because they're now able to do things with their hands, and we lost them all together to a competing industry for the skilled labor that this person could have been for us. So I think we got to kind of really circle our wagons here and get involved with the schools. If you're already involved, bully for you. Outstanding. I commend you for that. Now, for those of you who are not, go look in the mirror, go find out who your local school is with a collision repair program and get involved. I think it'll pay you dividends. In fact, I know it'll pay you dividends, as well as help some young folks find meaningful and very lucrative careers working for you. So that's what I think we need to do as an industry for the schools. All right, so that's my message for this afternoon. I'll give it back over to James. I've talked myself completely out. Has anybody got any questions or comments, rude gestures or remarks, anything?
No, we're going to give them a minute to get their questions in. So the calibration, I completely agree with. You know, I bought my first car that has most of this stuff on it, and it's super freaky. You know, when you go to switch lanes and the car is pulling you back in the lane because you maybe forgot to turn your blinker on, but So that's super cool. And I think we just, as an industry, we got to get much, much, much better with that, because we're a ways away. And I was telling you beforehand, I went down for that Nissan training, and the aftermarket tools just aren't quite cutting it. I think to cover your liability, you have to make sure it's documented right, whether you do it or somebody else does it. And you have to make sure that you keep that documentation, because it's still your liability, whether you sublet it out or not. That's
Yeah.
pretty much what everybody's saying.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that kind of struck me is, as I had been learning about some of the DTCs that were not showing up because the condition wasn't there at the time of the accident, and then later on it did show up. My heavens, we didn't even know it was a problem. We didn't even know to ask the question. But
So I just learned this. I just learned that a Honda, when an airbag deploys, does not throw a DTC.
And it always did before. What happened?
Well, they said there's nothing wrong with it. They said, why would we make it throw a trouble code? It did as it was supposed to. You have to actually go into the live data to see it, to see that it deployed, because it's not going to throw a code.
So we don't rely on DTCs or dash lights anymore, or at least not like we used to. That's for darn sure.
Right. Well, I don't know that we're going to have any questions.
Well, I'm going to consider that a success that I talked them, just completely talked circles around them. But I got to say, everybody that's still on, look, you see my iCar email address. You got my name. You got my email. It's david.robinette@i-car.com. There's my cell phone. I pride myself at returning calls as fast as I get them, and usually within the same day, if at all possible. You got a question about iCar, you got a question about anything we've talked about here tonight, I am all ears. Happy to help. I can either get answers for you or get you in touch with people who have better answers than I do. But the bottom line is, you got somebody you can call and talk about this stuff with, and I'm happy to be one of those people.
He always takes my calls, so thank you for that.
Indeed.
Everybody, May 3rd is Aztec, so we are going to expand on the ADAS stuff in a couple weeks. And for the NABA and KABA, thank you for joining. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. And Mr. Robinette, thank you very much for coming on tonight. We highly appreciate it.
A genuine pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Everybody have a good night.